Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. Hi guys, and welcome to part 4 of the Shining discussion. Part 4 is called Snowbound, and it starts with chapter 26, Dreamland. So we left Danny, and he was inside room 217, face to face with the tub woman. And during this time, both Jack and Wendy have fallen asleep. It's during the daytime. They both just kind of got tired and fell asleep. So Jack is in the cellar, and there is a passage that I'm going to read to you. He has rationalized, quote, he would write the book. If it meant the end of his association with Al Shockley, that would have to be. He would write the hotel's biography, write it straight from the shoulder, and the introduction would be his hallucination that the topiary animals had moved. The title would be uninspired but workable. Strange Resort, the story of the Overlook Hotel. Straight from the shoulder, yes, but it would not be written vindictively in any effort to get back at Al or Stuart Ullman or George Hatfield or his father, miserable, bullying drunk that he had been, or anyone else for that matter. He would write it because the Overlook had enchanted him. Could any other explanation be so simple or so true? He would write it for the reason he felt that all great literature, fiction and nonfiction, was written. Truth comes out. In the end, it always comes out. He would write it because he felt he had to. That's page 235 to 236. We get to hear about Jack's dad, and his father was someone that Jack loved very much. He was a male nurse, alcoholic, very abusive toward his wife and his kids. Jack was kind of the only kid who really liked his father, and when he got older, he started realizing that his siblings just didn't bring friends around. They kind of loathed their dad. And Jack changed his mind about his father when his dad put his mom in the hospital one time after he beat her with his cane. So they were having dinner, and Jack's dad just reached over with his cane and whacked his wife, and he kept going after her. The kids ended up taking the cane away, and they called the doctor, and it was a whole thing, and the mother corroborated the story that Jack's father told, that she had fallen down the stairs. So the kids kind of lost respect for their mother as well, because she just, went along with the lies, and she stayed with him. So while Jack is sleeping in the cellar, he hears his dad's voice on the CB radio, and it's telling him to kill Wendy and Danny. So Jack goes up, he's sleepwalking, or he's having a trance of some kind, and he smashes the radio. Now remember that their phone lines are already down. They don't have any way of reaching the outside world except for the CB radio and the Snowmobile. So Jack has smashed the radio. Wendy comes in. He's very contrite. He is confused. He tells her that, it was his father's voice coming from there, and he must have just been confused and sleepy. And he hated his dad so much that he wanted to smash the radio and not hear him, not hear the awful things that he was saying. Chapter 27 is Catatonic. They discover Danny, who has escaped from the room, and he is just standing at the top of the stairs. He's completely out of it. And while Danny is just standing there, they run to him, and they're confused. They ask him what's wrong, and Wendy accuses Jack of beating him. They see the marks on his neck and the fact that he is just unable to make any kind of cohesive words. He's just staring blankly, that kind of thing. Chapter 28 is It Was Her. So Jack seeks solace in the Colorado Lounge. He is mad because Wendy has locked herself in the bedroom with Danny, and this is one of the big scenes in the movie. We get Lloyd the bartender. People are in the room tittering, and whenever Jack turns around, he can't see them, that kind of thing. And Jack is drinking 20 martinis that are lined up for him by by Lloyd, the bartender, and he's just knocking him back and setting him down, even though there's nothing there. So Wendy comes in with Danny, and the catatonia breaks, and Danny starts screaming hysterically. It must have been like a delayed reaction, and he is screaming, "It was her." Quote, Jack looked slowly up into Wendy's face. His eyes were like small silver coins. "Wendy," voice soft, nearly purring. "Wendy, what did you do to him?" That's on page 257. So Jack is kind of enjoying this idea of letting Wendy have a taste of her own medicine. You know, she accuses him because of what has happened in the past that she will never forget. Jack will never forget. And, you know, there's this hostility between them because, like we talked about, Wendy can throw it in his face whenever she wants, and Jack is always waiting for her to throw it in his face. So to have the accusation be directed at her makes Jack feel better. Chapter 29 is kitchen talk, and Jack basically says, you know, I know it wasn't you, Wendy. I think he said you would light yourself on fire before you would, you know, hurt Danny. So Danny spills everything. He talks about how he knew about the phone calls to Ullman and Al. He tells them about his conversation that he had with Halloran. He tells them what he saw on the presidential suite wall. Just all this stuff is pouring out of him. And Jack does not confess to the hedge animal incident at this time, despite being asked. So he really should, but he doesn't. Chapter 30 is 217 Revisited, and this is a really good chapter. I really like this. So Jack finds a bath mat in the room. And it shouldn't have been there. It should have been picked up with all the other linens. The tub is dry, the mat is dry, but there is a faint smell of soap, like a fancy soap. As Jack is leaving, he hears the metal shower rings moving across the shower rod. And he goes back into the bathroom, and the curtain, the shower curtain, is now drawn. And he had pulled the shower curtain to see inside the tub. So something is in the tub behind the now drawn shower curtain. He leaves without checking because he's terrified, and he shuts the door, and he's standing in the hallway. Quote, "From inside, he seemed to hear an odd, wet thumping sound, far off, dim, as if something had just scrambled belatedly out of the tub, as if to greet a caller, as if it had realized the caller was leaving before the social amenities had been completed. And so it was now rushing to the door, all purple and grinning, to invite the caller back inside, perhaps forever." That's on page 268. So Jack fumbles and then locks the door and closes his eyes, and he just stands there, and he can hear the doorknob turning. The doorknob is turning. Quote, "If he opened his eyes and saw that doorknob moving, he would go mad. So he kept them shut, and after an unknowable time, there was stillness." Page 269. Chapter 31 is The Verdict. And this is a pivotal moment because I feel like Jack is just completely lost to Wendy and Danny at this time. He goes back, quote, "Nothing there, not a thing," on page 270. That's what he tells them. He didn't see anything in room 217. You know, that was his chance to join their side. So he's on the overlooked side, you know, and he thinks about how he really, really wants a drink. Chapter 32 is The Bedroom. Jack and Wendy are discussing how they're going to take Danny down to Sidewinder. So Jack is telling her it's impossible. He's basically leading her with all these worst case scenarios, and then all of a sudden Wendy remembers that they have the snowmobile that they could use, and Jack is filled with rage because he doesn't want her to think of a way to escape, basically, and he imagines strangling Wendy to death, which is quite disturbing. And when Jack finally goes to sleep after he promises Wendy that he'll check out the snowmobile in the morning, he has this dream where George is in the tub in 217 with a knife in his chest. Very vivid. George gets out of the tub and starts chasing him, and it cuts to Jack is beating George with a cane, his dad's cane, and telling him that he'll take his medicine, which is something that is a common theme throughout this, about taking your medicine. And the cane turns to a roque mallet, and before the final blow, the face of George turns into the face of Danny. So as Jack is ready to, finish George off, all of a sudden it's Danny instead. Chapter 33 is the snowmobile. So Jack is torn. He is in the shed looking at the snowmobile. He has these thoughts of, I have to get Danny out of here. This is not good for him. And then he's also thinking, he's going back and forth, and he's rationalizing, and he's saying, well, we could stay. It's not that bad. And it's the Overlook working on him, like trying to get him to not leave. Quote, the hotel wanted Danny, maybe all of them, but Danny for sure. The Hedges had really walked. There was a dead woman in 217, a woman that was perhaps only a spirit and harmless under most circumstances, but a woman who was now in active danger. That's on page 294. So Jack finds the spark plugs for the Ski-Doo. He finds the battery, puts that in. He was looking for the battery and couldn't find it, and he was actually thinking, oh, I looked everywhere, didn't see it, too bad, we don't get to go. And as he's leaving, he happens to just catch a glimpse of the box that the battery is kept in, and he's thinking to himself, well, now I can't, use that excuse that I didn't see it. Now I'm actively ignoring it, which he does, and he goes out and he looks and sees Danny outside, and he's overcome with, the love for his son, and he wants to get him to safety, and he realizes that this place is so bad for him. So he ends up putting the battery in, and then in an irreversible move, he, quote, leaned over the Ski-Doo's motor compartment and yanked off the magneto. It came off with sickening ease. He looked at it for a moment, then went to the equipment shed's back door and opened it. From here, the view of the mountains was unobstructed. Picture postcard beautiful in the twinkling brightness of morning. An unbroken field of snow rose to the first pines about a mile distant. He flung the magneto as far out into the snow as he could. It went much further than it should have. There was a light puff of snow when it fell. The light breeze carried the snow granules away to fresh resting places. Jack has made his decision. He has sabotaged the snowmobile, which is their only escape at this point, and he did it because the Overlook is making him do it. And it's the Overlook is helping things along. It helped him throw this, I don't even know, it's like a generator piece or something to the snowmobile. It helped him throw it way further than it should have. He's not going to be able to find it now. When Danny was having that dream about someone chasing him through the Overlook halls and he couldn't see who it was, the Overlook manifested wasps to stop Danny from seeing this face reveal and knowing what he has to worry about, that kind of thing. So the Overlook is definitely working against them. And, quote, he stood in the doorway for a long time, breathing the good mountain air, and then he closed it firmly and went back out the other door to tell Wendy they would be staying. On the way, he stopped and had a snowball fight with Danny. Page 297. So Jack is very okay with his decision, and he has basically doomed his family, and he's okay with it. Chapter 34 is the Hedges. We are at the 29th of November at this point. Danny is playing outside while his parents are upstairs sleeping. And he goes to the playground, and there's this cement tunnel, which has been snowed in, and Danny goes to one end of it and digs out the snow, and he starts crawling around in there and playing. And when he gets to the other end, which is also packed with snow, he starts digging it, and it's very solid and very hard to get the snow out. So then he starts freaking out about the fact that he is trapped in this tunnel. No one knows where he is. just any bad things could happen. So then he's convinced that something is in there with him. And he turns to leave. He's kind of panicky. And he gets to the end that he had entered from. And there's a slight snow cave-in, so he has to dig himself out. And, quote, "At the far end of the concrete ring, Danny heard the stealthy crackle of dead leaves as something came for him on its hands and knees. At any moment, he would feel its cold hand close over his ankle." That's on page 301. So Danny is filled with terror, which is kind of like his natural state at this point. He digs himself out really fast. He's wearing snowshoes, by the way, this whole time. He escapes. He's in the bright sunlight again, and he crawls away, and he is, keeping an eye on it, as you do. Like, if you see a spider, and you have to keep your eye on it to make sure it doesn't move, that kind of thing. So Danny escapes, and he's looking at this thing while he's readjusting his snowshoes. He sees, quote, "the waving hand of some desperately unhappy child," on page 303. So that is just a creepy image. At this point, snow starts dropping from the hedge animals as they start moving and getting closer and closer to Danny. Same thing that happened with Jack. When you're not looking, they get really close. When you look at them, they kind of stop. So Danny is being very careful because he's wearing his snowshoes, which makes his escape very harrowing. And he manages to get all the way up to the porch of the overlook. The animals are after him. They're definitely chasing him at this point. And he gets, I don't know if it's a bite or if he gets like swiped at with one of the lion paws kind of thing, but he gets an injury on his leg, and it produces the smell of blood and evergreen, which sounds like a perfume. Chapter 35 is the lobby, and Wendy and Jack come down and find Danny very disturbed, very hysterical because he had gotten attacked, and he tells them about it. He doesn't tell them about the child that was in the ring with him, and he's talking to them about the hedges, and Jack is saying, well, look outside, they are back where they always are, and the only tracks in the snow are your tracks. And as they're sitting there, Danny all of a sudden knows that Jack understands that he's telling the truth and that something has happened to Jack that makes him believe this story, even though he's saying to Danny that, this can't be true, you had a hallucination. So Danny says, I'm telling the truth because, and then at that point Jack slaps him. When Jack and Wendy are discussing this, Jack wants Wendy to ask him what Danny was talking about. And he decides that, if she asks him, he's going to spill the beans. He's going to tell her everything. He's going to tell her about the woman in the bathtub. He's going to tell her about the hedge animals. He's going to tell her maybe about the snowmobile. But she doesn't ask. So he doesn't tell. Chapter 36 is the elevator. The elevator starts running in the middle of the night and wakes everyone up. So all three of them go out into the hall and they see the elevator just going up and down. And Wendy and Danny hear party noises and Glenn Miller music. And I think Jack hears it, but he won't admit it. So Jack ends up stopping the elevator, and the elevator is between floors. So he has to kind of like look up into the car. So he looks up there and he says that he doesn't see anything in there. It's empty. So Wendy comes along and she doesn't believe him. She pulls him out of the way, hoists herself up, and finds confetti and a party mask inside. So she knows Jack lied. There's something in there. Chapter 37 is the ballroom. So this is now the 1st of December. And Danny is beginning to realize that he is a key that has activated the Overlook, has given the Overlook energy. It's drawing from Danny. And Danny goes into a trance. Tony isn't able to reach him. He can hear Tony. He's saying that, he's being kept away, but to get in contact with Dick Halloran, call him for help. So Danny sees the scene of his parents' bedroom, and it's just torn apart. And he sees red rum in the bathroom, and he can see this time the reflection in the mirror. And he knows now that it is reflecting the word murder. He also sees December 2 in red. So that's tomorrow. Something bad is probably going to happen tomorrow. So Danny starts using his powers to call Dick for help. So that's where we end part 4. Danny realizes that, this has gone on and it's way out of control and he needs help, outside help. And the Rangers aren't going to come. Pretty much up to him and Dick Halloran. So that is the end of part 4. Last part is part 5, and we will cover that next week. Have a spooky day.